When you're working in garter stitch, or if you're working in stockinette with a garter stitch border, and you would like to graft these two pieces together at the top, what you need to do is work the piece halfway across and then graft from the center out toward the edge. And the reason for this is that when you graft garter stitch, you need to have one edge be a knit and one edge be a purl, and you can only do that if you've worked across half of the stitches and have not worked the other half. So in this case, I've got a little sample it simulates the hood of a sweater. So I've worked halfway across, and then I cut my yarn and I leave a tail that's 4 times as long as the width of the item. So that gives me enough yarn to actually graft plus have some tail to work with, because you need about 3 times the width of the item to actually form the graft, and then you need some tail to work with as well. So I've come halfway across, and now I'm ready to thread my tapestry. Okay, so I folded them in half, and the needle with the working yarn is in the back. So first we need to do the setup, and we're going to be working this part in stockinette. We're going to be working in stockinette until we get to the last 5 stitches, and then we will graft in garter stitch. So the first thing you do is the setup, which involves entering the first stitch on the front needle as if to purl. So if you were to pretend this is a knitting needle and you were going to purl, you'd enter like that. So you just enter this one stitch, and then you pull the yarn through, and you make sure that when you pull the yarn through, it stays below the needles here. And the second part of the setup is to enter the stitch on the back needle as if to knit with the tapestry needle. So if we were knitting this, we would go through like this, and then once again we pull the yarn through. Now you can pull it fairly snugly. You don't want to pull it super tight. If you don't pull it tightly enough, you can always adjust the tension later by getting the excess slack out, but it's a little harder to put slack back into the stitches. So you can pull it snugly, but don't yank on it too hard. Now when we enter the stitches with the tapestry needle, we're going to be working with 2 stitches on each needle before we pull the yarn through. So last time on the front we entered as if to purl. This time we're going to enter as if to knit, and then we're going to let that stitch fall off the needle. So we can say knit off, because it's coming off the needle. And the second stitch we're going to enter as if to purl, but it's going to stay on. So we can call that purl on. And then after we've entered each of those stitches, then we pull the yarn through. On the back needle, we do the opposite. We insert as if to purl, and then we let that one off. So we purl off, and then we enter the second stitch as if to knit. And then we pull the yarn through. And again, making sure that the working yarn stays below the needle. And you'll see sometimes it'll trap these stitches a little bit. You just give it a tug. So now we go back to the front needle. So we knit off, purl on, then pull the yarn through. Purl off, knit on, pull the yarn through. So up till now we've been grafting in stockinette, and now we're about to remove this stitch off and we'll begin the garter stitch. So when you were at this point, so we have 5 garter stitch and we have the last stockinette stitch. When we're at this point, then we transition from grafting in stockinette to grafting in garter. So now for the front needle, you're going to continue grafting just as you have, and that is that you're going to knit off this first stitch, and then you will purl on the second stitch. On the back, you will do this first stitch as you have been, which is purling off, and now you've gotten rid of the last stockinette stitch, and now you're going to begin the garter stitch process, and you will purl on. So you purled off, and now you're going to purl on. Now that is just for the transition. From now on, you're going to work both needles exactly the same, which is that you're going to knit off and purl on. And on the back needle, you will knit off and then you will purl back on. And you'll continue doing that until you have just one stitch left on each needle. Okay, so now for the final 2 stitches, to finish it off, you've only got 1 stitch on each needle. You're going to knit off the first stitch on the front needle, and you're going to knit off the stitch remaining on the left needle, and then you're going to pull it through. Now, what you can see is that we've grafted it completely. We've got stockinette and then we've got the garter stitch, but we've got some loose stitches here. So what you can do is, let me put the needles aside. What you can do is take the extra slack out of the graft, starting at the position where you started from. So you just insert your tapestry needle in and give the yarn a little tug, and then you go to the next stitch and pull up on that, working across each one as you go to take the extra slack out of that, out of the graft, going all the way across. So that the idea is that you can match the stitch size going all the way across, and that so that no one will be able to see that there is a graft there going across. And over here you can see that the garter stitch matches up perfectly as well. And then once you have removed all the excess slack all the way across, then you turn it over and you can weave your tail in.